You know that feeling when you open the fridge, expecting to find the leftover cheesecake you've been thinking about all day, only to discover someone else ate it? Multiply that by 10, and you might approach how I felt when I found out my husband was cheating on me, with men he met in online chat rooms, no less. Let me back up a bit. My name is Sarah, and up until 3 weeks ago, I thought I was living the dream. Great job, cozy house in the suburbs, and a husband, Mike, who could charm the socks off a snake. We'd been married for 8 blissful years. Our friends called us the power couple, and I wore that badge with pride. Little did I know, the power dynamic was about to shift dramatically. It all started innocuously enough. I was cleaning out the garage Mike's domain when I stumbled upon an old laptop tucked behind a stack of dusty boxes labeled college stuff. Curiosity piqued, I powered it on, half expecting to find cringeworthy essays or a trove of terrible music. Instead, I found something far more interesting. The desktop background was a photo of Mike and some guy I'd never seen before, both grinning like they'd just won the lottery. Odd, but maybe an old friend? Then I noticed a folder on the desktop titled Tax Documents. Now Mike is many things, but organized isn't one of them. His idea of filing taxes involves a shoebox and a prayer. So, of course, I opened it. Inside were screenshots of chat conversations, some explicit photos, and a list of usernames, his and others. My heart raced as I clicked through the files. The chats were, well, let's just say they weren't discussing the stock market. And the usernames? All tied to various gay dating sites and chat rooms. At first, I was numb. Then came the anger, swiftly followed by a desire for vengeance so strong it surprised even me. But I wasn't about to confront him and give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Oh no. If Mike wanted to play games, he'd picked the wrong opponent. I spent the next few days devising a plan, a clever, unconventional, and detailed plan, if I do say so myself. After all, revenge is a dish best served with a side of poetic justice. First, I needed to gather more intel. I wasn't about to go off half-cocked. So, I created a fake profile on one of the dating sites he frequented. Meet Jake the Snake, a tall, dark, and handsome stranger with a penchant for adventure and a profile picture pilfered from a stock photo website. Within hours of setting up the account, Mike, using the oh-so-original handle, Mike by Wonder, sent me a message. Hey there, handsome. Looking for some fun? I nearly gagged but kept my composure. Absolutely, I replied. I have a feeling we're going to get along splendidly. Over the next week we chatted incessantly. He shared things he'd never told me. His secret desires, his need for discretion, and his love for Italian cuisine. Oh, the irony. I made sure to mirror his interests perfectly. If he liked hiking, so did I. If he adored obscure French films, I was suddenly a cinephile. Once I had him hooked, I suggested we meet in person. Let's add a little thrill, I wrote. How about a masked rendezvous? Adds to the mystery. He was all in. We planned to meet at a discreet hotel downtown, one that conveniently had a bar frequented by several of our mutual friends. Phase 1 of my plan was in motion. On the day of the meeting, I donned a sharp suit, complete with a fedora and a masquerade mask. Thank you, last year's Halloween costume. I arrived early and tipped the bartender handsomely to keep an eye on Mike when he arrived. Right on cue, Mike walked in, wearing a mask and looking around nervously. The bartender directed him to a table in the corner, as per my instructions. I watched from a distance, savoring the moment. Now here's where it gets juicy. I had previously arranged for a flash mob to perform at the bar. Not just any flash mob, a singing telegram troupe specializing in public breakups. They burst into the bar, singing a catchy tune about a cheating lover, complete with harmonies and choreographed dance moves. The entire bar turned to watch, cameras out, capturing every glorious second. Mike's face turned 50 shades of red as the troupe circled him, belting out, "You thought you could cheat, but now you're beat." It was a masterpiece. The bar patrons applauded, some even recognizing Mike. Word spreads quickly in our social circle. But I wasn't done yet. Phase 2 involved a little technological magic. Remember that old laptop? I had copied all his incriminating files onto a USB drive. Using an anonymous email account, I sent the files to his boss, who happens to be a stickler for company ethics. Did I mention Mike works for a conservative firm that frowns upon any scandalous behavior? The next day, Mike was called into HR. They confronted him with the evidence misuse of company time and resources, inappropriate conduct, the whole 9 yards. He was suspended pending further investigation. Meanwhile, I paid a visit to a divorce lawyer. I made sure all my ducks were in a row. Thanks to a prenuptial agreement that included an infidelity clause, always read the fine print, folks, I was set to receive a substantial settlement. But wait, there's more. Phase 3 was perhaps my pièce de résistance. Mike had always been proud of his car, a sleek red sports car he babied more than our houseplants. So, I decided it needed a makeover. I hired a professional artist to repaint it, a vibrant rainbow flag covering every inch. On the hood, in bold letters, it read, "Just divorced." I parked it outside his office building, keys left with the receptionist. When Mike emerged from his disastrous HR meeting, he was greeted by a crowd of amused onlookers snapping photos of his newly decorated car. His jaw dropped, and I could almost see the steam coming out of his ears. He called me, furious. "What the hell did you do to my car?" "Just thought it could use some color," I replied sweetly. "Consider it a parting gift." "You've ruined me," he shouted. "No, darling. You've done that all on your own." He hung up and I felt a satisfaction like never before. But I wasn't entirely heartless. Phase 4 was about closure for both of us. I arranged to meet him at a cafe to talk things over. He agreed, probably hoping to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. When I arrived, he looked disheveled, a shadow of his former self. "Why?" he asked, eyes pleading. "Why did you do all this?" I sipped my latte thoughtfully. "You know, Mike, marriage is built on trust. You broke that. And instead of owning up to it, you continued to deceive me. Consider this a lesson in accountability." He shook his head. "I never meant to hurt you." "Funny how intentions don't erase actions," I replied. "But I'm not here to argue. I wanted to give you this." I slid an envelope across the table. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a list of therapists specializing in sexuality and relationships. "I think it's time you faced who you are," I said gently. "Not for me, but for yourself." He looked up, tears welling in his eyes. "I don't know where to start." "That's the beauty of beginnings," I smiled. "You can start anywhere." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I stood up. "Take care, Mike." As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I received an invitation to an art gallery opening. It was from Alex, one of the artists whose work I'd admired online. Curious, I decided to attend. The gallery was buzzing with energy. Vibrant paintings adorned the walls, each more captivating than the last. I was examining a particularly striking piece when a voice behind me said, "Beautiful, isn't it?" I turned to see a tall man with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Indeed," I replied. "The use of color is mesmerizing." We chatted for a while, and I learned that he was the artist behind the work. His name was Daniel, and he had a passion for finding beauty in unexpected places. As the evening progressed, I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Daniel was charming, intelligent, and refreshingly genuine. At the end of the night, he asked, "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime?" I hesitated for a moment, then thought, why not? "I'd love that," I replied. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I grew closer. He was a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the storm I'd weathered with Mike. One afternoon, as we strolled through a park, he turned to me and said, "You seem like someone who's been through a lot." I smiled wryly. "You have no idea." "Care to share?" I took a deep breath and told him everything, the betrayal, the revenge, the aftermath. He listened attentively, never interrupting. When I finished, he said, "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted, "but it was necessary." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes we have to go through the worst to get to the best." I looked at him, surprised by his insight. I think you're right." As the months passed, Mike and I finalized the divorce. He moved to another city, seeking a fresh start. Last I heard, he was attending therapy and trying to figure out his life. I genuinely hoped he found the peace he was looking for. As for me, I embraced my new beginning. I took up painting, inspired by Daniel's work, and found solace in creating something beautiful out of chaos. One day, Daniel surprised me with a canvas of my own, a vibrant piece depicting a phoenix rising from the ashes. "Thought it might resonate with you," he said. I stared at the painting, emotions swirling. "It's perfect," I whispered. He smiled. "Just like you?" "Cheesy? Absolutely. But in that moment, I didn't care. Life has a funny way of turning things around." What started as a journey of vengeance led me to rediscover myself and find happiness in the most unexpected place. So, to anyone out there dealing with betrayal, remember this. Sometimes, the best revenge is living well and finding joy despite the pain others may cause. And if you can throw in a little creative payback along the way, well, that's just icing on the cake. In the end, I didn't just survive, I thrived. And as I look forward to the future, I do so with a heart that's healed and a spirit that's unbreakable. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we are far stronger than we realize, and sometimes it takes a twist in our story to discover the hero within. So here's to new beginnings, unexpected friendships, and the sweet taste of triumph over adversity. Oh, and to never underestimating a woman with a plan. 5 months later, months slipped by like pages turning in a well-loved book, each one bringing new chapters of healing and self-discovery. Autumn painted the town in shades of amber and crimson, mirroring the transformation in my own life. I often found myself reflecting on the whirlwind of events that led me here, to this moment of unexpected contentment. Mike reached out to me recently. He sent a long email filled with apologies and admissions, telling me he'd started therapy and was beginning to understand himself better. He said he was sorry for the pain he'd caused and hoped I could one day forgive him. I read his words carefully, feeling a mix of emotions: relief, closure, but most importantly, peace. I decided to respond, keeping it brief yet sincere. I told him I appreciated his apology and wished him well on his journey toward self-acceptance. It wasn't about absolving him of his actions, but rather freeing myself from any lingering resentment. Letting go felt like shedding a heavy coat I no longer needed. Meanwhile, things with Daniel blossomed into something beautiful and unexpected. We spent our weekends exploring art galleries, hiking trails, and little hole-in-the-wall cafes that served the best espresso. His presence was a soothing balm to my once wounded heart. There was an ease between us, a gentle understanding that didn't require grand gestures or dramatic declarations. One afternoon, as we sat painting together in a park, Daniel turned to me and said, "You know, scars are just stories waiting to be told." I smiled, realizing that my story was far from over. It was simply taking a new direction. Professionally, I took a leap and started offering freelance consulting services, helping businesses with marketing strategies. The freedom was exhilarating. I set my own hours, chose projects that excited me, and even began mentoring young women entering the industry. It felt empowering to use my experience to lift others up. I also reconnected with old friends and even made some new ones. We formed a book club that was really just an excuse to drink wine and share stories. Laughter became a regular sound in my home again, a melody I hadn't realized I'd missed. As for the house, I decided to sell it. It was time to close that chapter and start fresh. Daniel and I found a charming loft downtown with exposed brick walls and large windows that let in the morning sun. We filled it with plants, art, and the smell of fresh coffee. It felt like home, not just a place to live, but a space where joy resided. Occasionally, whispers of the past would surface, a familiar song, a mutual acquaintance's update about Mike, but they no longer stirred pain. Instead, They served as gentle reminders of how far I'd come. One evening, as Daniel and I watched the city lights flicker from our balcony, he took my hand and said, "I'm grateful our paths crossed." I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of the moment envelop us. "Me too," I replied softly. Life has a funny way of leading us exactly where we need to be. In the quiet contentment of that night, I realized that my story wasn't defined by betrayal or revenge, but by resilience and the capacity to embrace happiness after hardship. Because in the end, the sweetest victory wasn't in the clever plans or the dramatic twists. It was in reclaiming my narrative and opening my heart to new beginnings.